Imagine for a moment that you are a lake sturgeon living in a temperate freshwater environment in North America. Because you're several decades old, you've become accustomed to some fluctuation in your realized environmental niche. However, over the past several years, you've noticed some significant change to your environment. There's less light penetrating your lake, resulting in less photosynthesis, and you notice the oxygen levels of the lake start to decrease significantly around you. Eventually, it gets to the point where you and your sturgeon friends must either find another environment that suits your abiotic and biotic requirements, or else you will die. This is due to an ecological process called eutrophication, which is something that Schindler wanted to examine a lot more closely in the 1960s and 70s to discover its causes. He did this by adding a bunch of different nutrients to lakes in North America and found that phosphorus was the leading cause of increased algal growth, which in turn depleted the oxygen levels of the lakes. To further explain this phenomenon, I'll turn your attention to the following diagrams. So here you can see an example of a lake before eutrophication, where sunlight is easily able to penetrate the lake and there is sustained growth of plants. In the second diagram, we can see the effects of eutrophication underway. So there's been a ton of added nitrogen and phosphorus due to human influence and chemical runoff to the lake, which has supported the growth of an algal bloom on the lake's surface, which in turn means that sunlight cannot properly penetrate the lake. When the algae and phytoplankton dies, it sinks to the bottom of the lake and decays, which is a process that takes in a ton of oxygen. And because the sunlight cannot properly support photosynthesis occurring, this means that there's a ton of depleted oxygen that creates a very unsuitable environment for many life forms. So it's very well known that photosynthesis is powered by solar energy, and it's a process of taking 6 CO2 molecules and 6 H2O molecules and then making glucose and oxygen. And when there isn't enough solar energy in the environment to power this, then it means that primary production cannot properly occur. When there is not enough photosynthesis occurring and there is nutrient pollution, this can lead to what is referred to as a dead zone, which is essentially an area that is no longer able to sustain biological life because there's not enough oxygen, and this causes fish who are able to move to a different environment to leave, or for all of the life there to die. The second largest dead zone in the world is currently in the Gulf of Mexico and is 70,000 square kilometers large. To properly understand the devastating effects that insufficient primary production can have on an ecosystem, we can turn our attention to a trophic pyramid. So bottom-up control is essentially when there are chemical or nutrient deficiencies that then result in limitations to the life forms in the environment. So if there is insufficient primary production, which is turning sunlight and nutrients into energy that can then be consumed by other organisms, that impacts primary consumers and secondary consumers such as carnivores and herbivores. This is why it is so essential for photosynthesis to occur. Although nutrient pollution can be very harmful to biological communities, nitrogen and phosphorus are so essential to growth. This is because they are both considered macronutrients, which by definition means that they are required in large quantities for the functioning of organisms. Nitrogen is essential to primary production, as well as structure and function, and phosphorus is essential to ATP, DNA, RNA, and forming the phospholipid bilayer. Too much of a good thing, such as essential nutrients, can actually turn very harmful and toxic to environments. Although eutrophication can occur naturally, it is drastically intensified and sped up by human influence. Schindler found in his lake experiments that chemical runoff from local household detergents was the main cause for eutrophication. However, agricultural practices and fertilizer runoff can also drastically impact the rate of eutrophication. When looking at potential solutions to ecological damage caused directly by human action, two-eyed seeing is a super helpful view to hold. Two-eyed seeing is a McMoggy teaching that essentially is the combination of Western and Indigenous scientific knowledge in order to properly address holistically damages and human impacts on the environment.